Hey, it's Tim, Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk. If this is your first time to the channel? Welcome. On this channel, you'll find truck and SUV news, reviews, and interesting stories and interviews like this one. Make sure you hit subscribe, click the bell, and smash the like button. We're talking about your truck. In this case, talking about the oil you use in your truck. A very interesting interview with my friend Jeff from the American Petroleum Institute. And we're going to talk to him about the new labels that have coming out in May 1st for these new oil types you can find at the store, at your Walmart, whatever. You can flip this bottle around, you're going to see some new changes. We're also going to talk about the benefits of this oil, including making your timing chain last longer and being more fuel efficient with your vehicle. Yeah, craziness, I know. So I'm going to stop babbling and get this interview right now. All right, I'm joined by Jeff from API, which is American Petroleum Institute. I had to look that one up. Jeff, can you give some background information on your job and your experience and what the heck is API?
Sure thing. And Tim, thanks for having me on Pickup Truck Talk. I appreciate that. It's always a good opportunity to get the word out about the new API licensed engine oils. So my name's Jeff Harmoning. I'm the manager of the Engine Oil and Licensing and Certification System, better known as EOLCS. API has been licensing engine oils for in excess of 35 years. And we do this so that we can ensure that consumers have high quality engine oils available to put in their engines and prolong the lifetime of their vehicles. So we really appreciate the time that you've given us to chat with you.
Oh, sure. So when you say licensing, what do you really mean by licensing? People, I think, assume that Shell creates their own oil blend, or Pennzoil creates their own oil blend, just goes on a shelf.
Yeah, and that's true. Everybody has their own oil blends. However, the engine oil licensing program, it allows these marketers, these different oil manufacturers, to license their products and use API's trademarks. We have several trademarks that everybody who's picked up a bottle off the shelf has probably seen at one time or another. One of those being the API Starburst, and on the back of the bottle, usually it's the API Donut. So these marketers license their products with API in order to be able to use the marks. And part of that licensing process requires that the marketers demonstrate for every formulation that could possibly fill that container or fill that bulk tank. They have to demonstrate that those oils meet the requirements of whatever standards they're claiming. And so that when they license their oils, they're actually disclosing to API very specific information about the formulation, proof that they passed all the tests that are baked into the specification. And then API will provide a license as long as these oils meet the specs that they want to claim. And then after that, we end up testing these products extensively in the aftermarket to ensure that everybody's sticking to the specifications.
So it's fair to say a thing or three about oil.
Yeah, we do. We've been doing this for a long time. We've got some, believe it or not, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 licensed engine oils around the world, because we're not just limited to North America. Of licensed engine oils that are using and representing their oils and as API licensed oils around the globe. So it's extensive. We've been doing it for a long time, and we hope that it is serving the consumer and serving the marketers and everybody else in between.
All right. So speaking of the consumer, and one of the reasons I have you on today is you have some new standards, and I think it's 6F-6A and 6F-6B.
It goes the other way around. These the standards are ILSAC GF6A.
Oh, GF, that's a G. I got to read my handwriting.
Yeah, and I'll get into that. ILSAC GF6B, and then the companion specification is API SP. So the GF specifications are developed by ILSAC, which is the International Lubricant Standards Advisory Committee. I hope I got that right. They've changed it recently, but that's a group of OEMs, both American and Japanese automakers, who specify requirements and set up needs statements for what the next generation of engine oils require. So those specifications are developed solely for the for the ILSAC crowd. And then API has a companion specification that basically covers all those non-traditional ILSAC grades, for the more oddball viscosity grades like 1540s, the 20W50s, and 1040s, etc. So.
Sure. So, and I'll play a video on the screen you guys have given me to kind of breaks down what these standards are. But I guess what I'm wondering is, you're going to put these standards, or marketers are going to take these standards, put them on their oil. But when I look at the information, you're really talking about improving the lifespan of a timing chain. So
Yeah. So
how does that work?
Sure. So the current today, right now, the current specifications are API SN and ILSAC GF5. On May 1st of this year, you'll start to see the new oils for GF6A, 6B, and API SP. So the first licensing date is May 1st, and that's when marketers are going to start putting these products on the shelves. The new specifications were developed and include 7 new engine tests, in addition to a whole gamut of bench tests, etc. But these engine tests allow these oils to provide better, for instance, more stringent sludge control, better wear protection. As you said, one of the new tests that was developed for this specification is a timing chain wear test. So these oils will have to undergo these engine tests before they can be proven to meet the specification. And so an engine test, very quickly at a high level, is an engine test stand at a laboratory following a systematic approach to the test, where the oil and a specific engine will be paired together, run for a number of hours to age the oil, and then both that oil and the engine itself will be evaluated and tested. So the aged oil will be tested using a number of bench tests, and the engine, depending on the test, will be broken down and various things will be inspected in order to be able to say that it meets these specification limits that the OEMs wanted it as part of the specification. So in addition to those things that we've already mentioned, there's also a test for LSPI, low speed preignition, which is a phenomenon has begun to occur in certain types of engines. And actually, it's the basis for the API SN Plus oils that you currently see on the shelves today. We developed an SN Plus category in the interim while we were waiting for GF6 to finish up its development process. And so the new oils will also take into consideration the LSPI issue, in addition to providing new tests for more stringent fuel economy that the OEMs require in order to meet their EPA and emissions regulations, et cetera. So those are sort of the drivers behind what the OEMs asked the marketers, the additive companies, and other folks involved in the process to help develop this specification so that we can service the needs of these current and future engines. So this will take us into the next sort of generation of engines, and will be around for a number of years until the next request comes out, or the next engine technology requires a different set of parameters.
So, and I'm just going to step back for a second, but you're talking about creating an oil that makes a timing chain last longer.
Mm-hmm.
But that seems kind of backwards to what some people think. Some people think, well, the engines are planned obsolescence. It's going to die at some point. They won't last forever. Timing change intervals are just because the chain wears out. But you're saying that the oil has a big key into how long that chain lasts.
Yeah, it can, and the properties of the new oil will help provide more protection for chain wear, not just for current engines, new engines, but also because our specifications are backwards compatible to previous specs. All those older engine requirements, let's say API SM, API SN, ILSAC GF5, when owner's manuals specify those older categories, these new categories are backwards compatible and will also provide the same protection, can be used in those older engines, and therefore provide additional protections for the older equipment. But yeah, you're exactly right. It's sort of a chicken egg sort of thing, but the oils, are sophisticated enough that they can provide these additional levels of protection for various equipment around the engine.
Now, I also got a group of guys going, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. You're talking about improving fuel economy, but you're with the oil companies.
Mm-hmm.
So don't oil companies want you to burn more gasoline and use more oil because it gets more profits for them? So how can you improve fuel economy?
Yeah, that's an obvious dichotomy sort of question that we encounter all the time. But really, because we work so closely with the OEMs and with the additive companies, this is really an everybody in this together sort of approach. When the OEMs, technologies become such that the current oils are no longer sufficient, or maybe aren't helping them achieve the fuel economies that they need, they work very closely with us to get out the next set of specifications. And really, it's a wonderful, now having been involved with this for about 10 years, it's really great to see the sort of collaboration that goes on, since I've seen it so close hand here with the development of the last specification. It's incredible to see the amount of collaboration, the amount of work, the amount of hours that engineers from all three of those industries really put in to ensure that we get a good oil spec out there that's going to help as many different engine types from as many different manufacturers as they possibly can. It really is an all-in approach.
That's very interesting. And then one other question, I saw the low speed preignition. Can you describe any more about what that is? I actually had never heard that term before.
Yeah, so low speed preignition, and correct, you can bear with me on this because I'm not somebody who's ever observed this directly or anything like that, but essentially it's a phenomenon in gasoline direct turbocharged engines where the cylinder is fired earlier while the piston is still moving upwards, and so it creates resistance. It can actually cause some pitting and damage to the piston, the rings, etc. And so it was necessary to try to figure out why that was happening and the result of this. And again, this was worked on several years ago as we developed the SN Plus category, is that various components in engine oils at that time could be modified to eliminate or reduce this phenomenon in these engines. And that was really the catalyst for the call to develop GF6 and API SP in the first place.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I think a lot of people, like on this channel, my audience, they would assume that the engine manufacturer has a defect. The engine's got a defect, and they should design an engineering solution to that. What you're saying is that you guys worked on the oil side to reduce that problem from happening.
Well, and I'm sure that the OEMs did handle that in that way as well. But again, in working with collaboration with the oil marketers and the additive companies that help develop these new oils, they were able to sort of assist with the problem as well. So again, it was an all-in approach, and it was just a bunch of great people putting their heads together to help minimize. The common user may experience the LSPI phenomenon as a sort of a super knock or something like that. That's sort of the experience that they would feel when they're driving their vehicle. And this would be in sort of low torque applications. So the new oils are going to help address that significantly.
Now, when I was growing up, whenever you had a knock in your engine, you just went and got the thicker oil, and you poured the thicker oil into the engine and got rid of the knock. But I'm assuming that these days, with these oils, that's maybe some differences in oils. I mean, in your experience in 10 years, how much different has oil become?
A lot. I can tell you, and that over the years, and you've probably seen this yourself, just looking at oils on a shelf, the industry as a whole and the engines that we're using today have gravitated towards lower viscosity engine oils. The most I would say the most popular engine oils from a licensing perspective. In the past, we had licensed many 10W30s, many 10W40s, and we still do, but we've seen a vast increase in 5W30, 5W20s. Now we're licensing oils all the way down to 0W16. So because these engine requirements require these lower viscosity oils, there are other ways that you have to address these problems like knock, and that's with the chemistry of the formulations themselves.
Yeah,
Because the automakers still need the low viscosities in order to be able to hit their fuel economy requirements and protect the engine. So the chemistries in engine oils have really gotten sophisticated over the last couple iterations for sure, and certainly with the new one.
it is weird. I drive 60 to 80 new vehicles a year, and you pop the hood, and the requirements 0W20 or 0W30, and you're just like, how is that even possible? 20 years ago, that wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even a pipe dream. But it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but these lower viscosities allow for less friction to build up in the engine, which is where you talk about the benefits of fuel economy and engine reliability, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Those are the properties that help us get these fuel economy requirements, which in indirectly affects things like drain intervals. It affects things like longevity of the engine. So all of it together is, yes, the engine oils have become part of that approach and that package to help keep equipment on the road longer, and and also help with the fuel economy and thus help the environment.
And speaking of drain intervals, this happens a lot in conversations that we have in the channel. I ask you two different versions of this. Is number one, there's for years it's been was it 3 months or 3,000 miles or whatever the deal was, 3 months, 3,000 miles. That was always a deal. Then they started going like 5 months, and then it seems like they've gone to a year now with synthetic blends, stuff like that. Where are we going with that? Do you think there'll be a time where we're going to really extend out how far oil changes get to?
Well, I mean, if you look at the recent trends, there's no reason to suspect that it won't continue in that manner. Certainly, the engine oils are capable of allowing that to continue, and it really is all up to the OEMs and API. This is our mantra: always follow your manufacturer's recommendations for your engine oil viscosity and for your required API service category. It is up to the OEMs to make those determinations on how long they want their drain intervals to be, and I see no reason for that not to continue as as a society we sort of trend towards conserving resources, etc.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's like this whole shift has happened, and people still don't believe it. And I'm going to ask you something. You may know the answer to this, may not, and we'll just see if we get an answer here. But there's been a lot of conversation. I've done a few. I think I have 4 or 5 videos now of 1,000,000-mile trucks, and these
Mm-hmm.
guys have put 1,000,000 miles on their trucks. It's a very popular video series I've done. And one of the questions come out with all these trucks is that transmission fluid, in that these new engines and these new transmissions are saying you never change the transmission fluid. You don't ever flush or fill transmission fluid. It's good for lifetime of the transmission fluid. From an oil standpoint, from your experience, I'll just ask it, how is that possible that you would never change the transmission fluid? Do you think that you're going to build up something in there or some sort of friction or something? You need oil is going to wear it down eventually, right?
Well, I mean, we don't license transmission fluids, and that's not a program that we've got right now. What I can tell you is that there's been the same sort of um, sophistication added to ATFs as well. So as these OEMs develop new types of transmissions, they're doing the same sort of testing with with the ATFs, and testing their transmissions in the same manner to be able to determine safely that you can potentially have a never drain sort of ATF. I don't. I can't get into specifics only because I don't really know. That's not really something that I'm super educated on, but it's within the realm of potential. It's still a petroleum-based lubricant, and the technologies are ever increasing within those lubricants.
Yeah, it comes up all the time in my comments, and yes, I do read my comments, which is something I dream about when I read. But anyways, when you're looking at oil-based, oils that you have, I said petroleum-based oils. With the synthetic blends, are you extending the usage of oils we're going to have? I mean, it's always like it's a fossil fuel. Fossil fuels can eventually go away. But it seems like once we switch from synthetic to conventional, that we're now extending the lifespan of the fossil fuels, I guess would be a way to say it.
Well, I wouldn't say it quite that way. One important thing to note about we get asked this question a lot. What's the difference between a full synthetic and a semi-synthetic, a synthetic blend and a conventional motor oil? Um,
Yeah,
the
which I'm going to ask you in a little bit.
Yeah, well, I hope I'm not jumping the gun, but the simple truth of that is that those terms are not defined. So there isn't a specification out there that says, in order for you to be able to market your oil as a synthetic blend, it must have X this and Y this. And this was actually settled in a court case a number of years ago that basically relegated those terms a bit into the marketing terms. Right now, there isn't an API specification or a specification by any other body that I'm aware of that specifies how to make a synthetic blend. Now, granted, when you're buying a synthetic blend oil or a full synthetic, there are definite differences between those types of oils. There's just not a specific uh, recipe or standard that those oils meet are required to meet, and it's not part of the API licensing program as a direct result of that. So your point is well taken, and hopefully I'm circling back to what your original question was. But these are. Oh, sorry, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about this. So speaking of this, so do synthetics use less oil, I guess, than conventional oils?
When a synthetic oil will have additional synthetic-based properties that are not mineral oils or base oil. So every engine oil is a combination of a base stock, an oil base stock, and then a system of additional additives that go into that base stock to get you the fully formulated oil in the end. Those base stocks can be paraffinic, can be other types of synthetic base stocks. So yes, I would expect that from a conventional upward, you would see less of the sort of group 1 mineral oils and more of the more sophisticated group 2s and group 3s. And that's certainly the way that these oils are formulated.
So in a way, you're using less oil to make synthetic oil, and that would, by a byproduct of that, we would be able to use oil for a longer period of time than just if we had stayed with conventional. We probably would use oil faster.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to slander the use of conventional oils either. They're all formulated to meet the current specifications, and I would draw everyone back to the importance of, if your OEM requires an oil of a certain viscosity and a certain API service category, regardless of how it's branded as a conventional or a high mileage or a full synthetic, you want to make sure that the oil that you're going to put in your next oil change is going to meet those requirements that the OEMs have specified. That together there is what is helping and that coupled with the extended drain intervals that we're sort of trending towards. Yeah, overall you could say we'll be using less and getting more out of our oils.
And so you really, with what OEM is stating is that you can't really say to somebody, if somebody says, hey, should I use synthetic or should you use conventional? Your answer is going to be, what's the OEM ask?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, because I mean that question comes up all the time in the channel. I had a guy comment. He says, should I use synthetic or conventional? Next guy replied within like 2 minutes. He goes, it's freaking 2020. How can we not use synthetic? And I was like, wait a minute here. So what you're saying is really there's benefits to both, and you just got to follow what the OEM says. So you can't make one better than the other.
That's right. That's exactly right. And for those guys that and gals that are used to once every couple of months flipping to that page in their owner's manual, they're going to, in 9 times out of 10, they're going to see must use API licensed oil. They'll see the API starburst in there for gasoline engines, or they may see use for your heavy duty engines, look for the donut with an API CK4. They're going to see those sorts of requirements. And, some OEMs are very specific. They will spell out exactly must use, OEM X's motor oil, but also you'll see in there has to be API licensed as well. So these are the things that people really need to focus on. Everybody for years and years, we still deal with this. Oil is oil. Oil is oil. It really isn't. Oils have gotten so sophisticated and do so many other things than what we classically thought they did. Rather than just reduce wear, they're doing a lot more than what you're able to see under the hood. So it's really important to stick with those recommendations and make sure that when you're in the store, if you're a DIY person, make sure you're looking for those marks on your products before you buy them. If you're more of a person that's DIFM or do it for me and go into your nearest quick lube to get it done, just make sure that you're asking for API licensed oil. And probably the second most important thing in those cases is to make sure that you're being told exactly what oils are being put into your vehicle at those types of service stations.
Video. Is there anything else we're missing from today's conversation?
Absolutely. Sure. There's one more thing. It's very important. I probably should have brought it up at the beginning, but there is a new API trademark coming out with this new ILSAC split specification. So currently, the API Starburst represents ILSAC GF5 oils. ILSAC GF5 will still be around for a year. We won't sunset that until April 30th of 2021. So for a brief period, you'll see both types of oils out on the shelves. But starting May 1st, the Starburst can be applied to ILSAC GF6A oils. And those oils are going to be backwards compatible to what everybody's used to in terms of looking for the Starburst. The new specification for ILSAC GF6B is specific to very low viscosity oils, specifically 0W16 oils that also meet the API resource conserving additional designation. And these oils are going to be represented by a new trademark that API has created. Those new shield oils are going to be backwards compatible for those applications that called for API 0W16SN with resource conserving oils. So now there'll be a nice easy mark for them to look at. And then in addition, the API SP, which will appear in the donut on the back, is going to be backwards compatible for all the previous API SN requirements. So these are the things that your consumers need, that consumers need to look out for, is to and understand, because there's another mark out there, and it's very important not to put a shielded oil into an application that requires a starbursted oil. So yet another reason to make sure that you're really following your manufacturer's recommendations going forward.
Interesting. I got one final question for you.
Sure.
How often do you get asked whether to tell somebody whether to choose Shell or Pennzoil or Quaker State or off the brand oil?
All the time. So this may be the 1 millionth time. In those cases, we don't make those recommendations. All of these oil marketers, and we've got right now around 700 different licensed oil marketers out there. And as I said earlier, we're up around 20,000 individually licensed products. There's a lot to choose from. It's really hard for the consumer to make those choices. We understand that. What we're here to do is to sort of provide the API marks, provide the consumers the assurance that we're not just, taking a check and saying, here, use the marks. There's a lot into licensing an engine oil. And then, we really want consumers to know that we are out there buying oils off the shelves at the local, Walmarts. We're out there buying oils at the local quick lubes, and we're testing those oils. And what we're doing with those test results is comparing those actual data. And we run about 20 different tests with the data that they submitted to us in terms of when they licensed the product. And if there's any non-compliances or non-conformances, API is working with those marketers to correct the problems, whether there was an issue with the mixing of the oil that day or something like that. We will we reserve the right to suspend the licenses or take a license away until these problems are resolved. And we're doing that basically every day. Our AMAP program runs all year long. It doesn't take a day off. It's been a little bit challenged, as everything has during the current crisis, but it's still up and running. We're still collecting samples. And, when you see the API marks on a bottle, you can be assured that those products have gone through pretty rigorous licensing and certainly rigorous AMAP testing. So we just encourage folks who are out there making oil buy choices, you can make sure that you're looking for the API marks. You can even go to our online directory, grab your phone up and go to your web browser and look for API engine oil directory. And we're usually the first thing to pop up. You can always, just while you're sitting there in the marketplace, just take a look and make sure that the oil that you're about to buy is API licensed. And when it is, you can be assured that it's a quality oil that meets the specifications.
Well, really interesting stuff today. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, anytime. We'll be glad to visit with you again. Thanks a lot.
Well, there you go. There's my interview with Jeff from API. Thanks, Jeff, for being on the program, and I hope you guys learned as much as I learned from the interview. That was really interesting stuff. Stuff doesn't really get covered very often. It's not, well, the sexiest thing, but I'm telling you, it's really interesting information, and I hope you guys got something from that. So please comment below if you did, and if you didn't, well, you're going to comment below anyways. Just let me know. Also, make sure to check out this video, because that video is really interesting as well. And make sure you find us on pickuptrucktalk.com and also Pickup Truck Talk on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Type it in. You'll find us. Trust me, we're there. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you down the road.